Hello, welcome to Squish Vision, where I am 7 hours behind, so we're gonna have to do this retrospective of the show fairly concisely. But I've just finished watching the final episode of season 3 of What If, and indeed the final episode of the show, named, I think very appropriately, What If. And so I'll talk a bit about what I thought of this episode first of all, and then I guess we talk a bit about the show as a whole and kind of where it landed. I struggle a lot to do these retrospectives because with a lot of these shows, it kind of everything I've said already still applies, and that's very much the case here. But anyway, this episode, what I liked about it, well, I mean, first of all, it did feel very reminiscent of Dragon Ball Z in its kind of. So it was, for the vast majority of the episode, essentially an action finale. And I mean, I guess that's also part of the criticism, because for a show about choice and how that kind of fractures into different paths, it's the same. I guess you can apply the same criticism that you applied to Secret Invasion, where it's meant to be this big psychological spy thriller. Who do you trust? What are people's agendas, etc., etc. And it ended in kind of this big fist fight. And that's the same thing here. And part of me is thinking, well, maybe that would have been all on brand if there was a more multiversal concept in the big kind of beat them up, but other than feeling like well, not live action adaptation, but other than like an adaptation of Multiversus game, which I've not actually played, or any other cross genre, any other kind of cross genre, no cross genre, cross like universe, like things like Super Smash Bros, where you've got different characters, different kind of franchises fighting each other. Other than feeling a bit like that, there wasn't really much of a kind of multiversal concept. It was just these bunch of characters from different kind of franchises, not even entirely using their own powers actually, because they're all using like souped up Watcher powers, just beat everyone up. But it did kind of capture, I think, a lot of the kind of excitement that you get from Dragon Ball Z. Well, I did anyway, growing from Dragon Ball Z, and I think the younger me would have very much been more into it. Not that I wasn't into it. It was, you had these grand scale attacks, and then the way it ended was very Dragon Ball Z as well. The bad guys seemingly getting the upper hand on the good guys. They're like inches away from like destroying, obliterating them all even. And then one character, through force of will, pushes through and in a sacrifice moment manages to kind of win the day. If it works Dragon Ball Z, should it not work for this? Perhaps. But I mean, there were like a few kind of like nice lines about choice and about you can only really appreciate the beauty of the world if you choose to live in it, and the more you remove. And I know it is true. It didn't go deeply into it. It just had a few nice lines about it, and I wonder if that's the right approach it should have taken. That's the right approach that they should have taken with it. I mean, using real world analogies. It's always about See, it's hard to really apply it to a real world analogy, because I guess the most real world analogy is observing things that happen in the wild, which I think most people ethically realize you shouldn't intervene in. Because that's just, and it's also kind of the prime directive in Star Trek, which is controversial to an extent. People have different kind of like issues with it, both in universe and out of universe. Most of that is kind of just the inconsistent way that it's often used more than anything else. Most people generally accept that the principle in itself is sound, because if you intervention when it comes from a position of superiority can often be bad for the civilization. And so by that logic, the three authoritarian watchers had a point. And you know, they could have made that point, you know, by intervening. You're removing agency, you're taking away the natural growth of universes, you know, where do you draw the line? These are all of the kind of philosophical arguments I would kind of expect to be in the episode, given what its apparent thesis statement should have been, and instead it was just a big beat 'em up fight. And I guess in that sense it wasn't that satisfactory. Like Uatu, which they do mention the name of. I said that last week. I was hoping they do mention Uatu's name, because I always struggle to realize how to pronounce Uatu, and I think it is Uatu if I can remember correctly. Uatu essentially conveys their thesis by beating it into Jason Isaacs' Watcher, which isn't how an argument works, really. So yeah, that's the kind of issue there with the finale. And as a show as a whole, I don't think I have any more kind of things to comment on it that I haven't already said. It has had some peaks, some highlight moments where we do take a story we know very well and we change one bit of it and we see what the ramifications of it are. Sometimes the ramifications of it are kind of very tangentially related to the change, and it doesn't really feel like it's connected to the point where it feels satisfactory. Other times it was. That's mostly in the first season of the show. They did more of that. But I think most people accept the first season of the show kind of had a better grasp on its mission statement, because it was able to do both the, well, what if this was slightly different, and it also kind of tie that into a finale where everyone was brought together. And the fact that everyone was brought together wasn't expected. We didn't think that was how the show was going to end. We didn't think it was going to have a continuing arc. So the fact that it did was a bit of a twist. And then it kind of became expected in every kind of subsequent iteration, every subsequent season, that they were going to do that and tie things together. And it became less of a kind of a wow factor. And they also kind of strayed away from... And not that this is inherently wrong, but I do feel like, given how limited the episodes were and how broad the concept is, they perhaps should have lent more into the small changes, ramifications, rather than just doing really wild, wacky, like out there kind of variants of our characters that we know. I have no issues, by the way, with Peggy Carter being a core character of the show. I think you do, even in anthology shows, especially nowadays, you do kind of need that connecting kind of tissue, and it can't just be the Watcher, because the Watcher isn't narratively part of most of the stories by design and by narrative implication. So you've got to kind of have a wider... I see memes of people complaining about Peggy Carter keeps getting brought back. That's fine. Like in this season, she's only in the last 2 episodes. It's fine. But I do feel like they could have. There's nothing inherently wrong, is my point, with the really wildly out there original stories. That's fine. But it needs to be balanced off with the promise of the premise, which wasn't really delivered a huge amount, I don't think. It's the same way the comics work. You know, you've got comic books, what if series comic books, where they take a small difference, but then you get things like a Spider-Verse multiverse. You get the Spider-Verse kind of multiverse thing where you've already set up this ongoing idea of small changes that you can then play around with. The idea that maybe in one universe, Spider-Man is a cowboy who rides on a horse, you know? I mean, even that's a small change for a bigger, larger kind of scale thing. yeah, like I said, this episode there wasn't really much in it to kind of pull from. I would question if it would have been maybe a more satisfactory ending if it was literally just the entire trial. Also, to answer the Ultron question from last week, I asked, from yesterday, from 2 days ago, that I asked myself, time doesn't make sense to me right now. But to answer the Ultron question, no, apparently he just genuinely decided he was going to be good and sacrifice his life. I guess that's fine. He got removed from the show, from the episode early enough that it didn't really become a factor. I was about to make another point before I introduced myself. Yeah, I don't think I've really made any kind of points in this reaction. I've not made entirely before. It was, look, for my criticisms, this was a satisfactory ending. I'm not feeling like, oh, they whiffed it. It is consistent with the rest of how the show has been going in kind of regards to you're just kind of throwing action figures together rather than dealing with the philosophy of choice. So I can't be like shocked and surprised that the ending didn't do that. Would I prefer the rest of the show to have perhaps dealt with that a bit more rather than this mostly in the first season? Yes, and I think that's pretty much what everyone else on the internet is saying. So I think I'll probably just leave it there because like I said, I'm 7 hours behind on things. And I probably will benefit catching up. Also, I need to watch and react to I need to watch and react to Spider-Man trailer because that seems to be pissing off a bunch of people, and I need to decide if that's genuine annoyance or most likely people being racist. So we'll end on that note. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I need to go do some stuff and I'll be back in a bit. So I'll see you all later. Get out of my house.